No, I try to follow the narrative of the story, and really, it's a very melodramatic story. So I'm working quite closely with the way the melodrama works. I mean, it's not like a modern film where there's a lot more subtlety in the emotions. Everything is very transparent. You'll see on everyone's face, everything is written very clearly. So it's almost like a Chaplin movie or something, a lot older. And I think in that respect, it's very powerful, and I think it works in a different kind of way to modern story. I emphasise the melodrama in this instance. Normally I wouldn't do that. Normally I'd be much more into the subtlety of the subtext and narrative, but with this, because there are no sound effects, there's no dialogue, there's nothing at all, you have to be the sound effects and you have to be the dialogue in many ways. So you have to really not only follow the narrative, but you also have to really push the melodrama as well. I mean, to be honest with you, what I do is every time there's a project, I just work on that project. I don't tend to think outside of that project. So whatever's happened before, what happens in the future is not important to me. It's just mainly about finding the feeling in the project, and that should be what it's about. As a musician, you're basically serving the idea of what you're working. I wouldn't say that there's anyone I want to work up to, because everyone is individual. I don't try to emulate anyone, but there are people that I think are inspirational figures. Whether that's in the Western world in terms of film composition, I would say people like Ennio Morricone or Bernard Herrmann. In terms of musical genius, I mean, there's people like Paco de Lucia or Paco Peña, or from India, Vilayat Khan, or Hariprasad Chaurasi, or Shiva Sharma, or some of the great classical musicians. Also Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, and that he transcended a lot of boundaries. So he was somebody that I really looked up to, in that his voice was used purely for its emotional content, not necessarily for its cultural heritage, which I found really interesting in films like Dead Man Walking or Natural Born Killers. But also, I think people who, ultimately on a human level, people like Nelson Mandela, people who've actually got some kind of conscience about the world and a good humanitarian. I never try to mix different cultures. I look at the emotional aspect of what I'm trying to get across as an idea. I'm very lucky in that I had a background where I learned a lot about Indian classical music at a very young age, and also Western classical music, and I was a trained Western classical pianist and played lots of different instruments and so on. I had a very good background that way. So I guess in that respect, I'm always looking for the emotion first and the idea first, and to convey a mood, like any language. I mean, if you learn to speak any given language, then you are looking to convey an idea. You don't really spend a lot of time worrying about the grammar. So it's much more about that than anything. It's just creating a vocabulary that makes sense with the project that you're working with. I'm doing quite a few projects, and I've just done, as I was saying, the music for a major video game from Sony PlayStation, which is called Enslaved, which I've just done with Andy Serkis, doing the motion capture, and Alex Garland, who wrote The Beach, and 28 Days Later was the writer for that. I've also just done the music for Human Planet, which is the BBC series, which is going to be coming out across the world. But I'm also doing the music for Midnight's Children, which is the Salman Rushdie novel that Deepa Mehta is actually going to be directing. I'll be scoring that sometime, I think, next year. And then I'm doing my own album at the moment. I'm working in Japan. I've just done another project with Akram Khan called Vertical Road. And I'm also doing a pipe organ commission for the Royal Albert Hall. But I'm also going to launch the album May 6th. I try to, well, it's more that each project has its own demands, so you try to talk to the directors, or you might, I mean, if I'm working on my own album, for instance, I have to be very prescriptive about what I want to do, and then I have to bring in various singers and various musicians accordingly, but I'll sit, like this morning I was just sitting around before I came here, writing lyrics and writing ideas on the guitar, or I'll do that on the piano, or I might suddenly start with an orchestral score. So it depends what I'm doing, really. If I'm writing with a director, quite often it can be a big orchestral score, so I might have to just sit down with Sibelius or with Logic and try and start from scratch with that.